Hey folks, let's discuss and unpack the upcoming Jupiter Neptune conjunction in Pisces, which has been gathering and gaining momentum, coming into focus in March as Jupiter inches nearer to Neptune, but which becomes exact on April 12, 2022. So the conjunction perfects on April 12, 2022. This will be somewhat of a short-lived conjunction, meaning the exact conjunction there will be a bit short-lived, as Jupiter will then move on to Aries. It will enter Aries in May, and then what we have is that Jupiter goes retrograde, and so in July it goes retrograde, and then it will go back into Pisces in October. And so in October, November and December we have Jupiter within about 6 or 7 degrees of Neptune in Pisces. So that's the kind of trajectory there for Jupiter. So Jupiter and Neptune perfecting their conjunction on April 12, but really gathering momentum, the conjunction gathering momentum, coming into focus really in March. And so April 12 is the kind of peak moment where the conjunction perfects, but Jupiter will kind of rush ahead and enter Aries, dip into Aries, and then it will go back into Pisces in July. It will retrograde back into Pisces, and then so, as we said, October, November, December, we have Jupiter within a few degrees of Neptune, about 6 or 7 degrees of Neptune. And so that's what we have to look forward to, just in terms of the nuts and bolts of the conjunction. But to backtrack a little bit for some context, so Neptune would have settled into Pisces in 2012, and so we're quite a long way into the Neptune in Pisces years. And of course, Jupiter would have dipped into Pisces in 2021, but has settled into Pisces at the end of last year, 2021, and into January 2022. So Jupiter there meeting Neptune for a conjunction this year. So this is an important, let's say, highlight on the astrological calendar, really setting up the energy significantly this year. And so it's something that we want to talk about and give some context to. And so we've been talking about the Neptune in Pisces years, and so we're 10 years into Neptune activating the Pisces sign field. And so one of the things that we've been discussing on the channel is the Neptune in Pisces years. They raise the question of, well, what's really real? So the imperative of sorting out, well, what is real from what is false. And of course, the Neptune in Pisces years have been defined by the ubiquity of the image. Yes, so images, they're quite Neptunian, quite Piscean. And so what's on your smartphones, your devices, the image, and moving images, moving pictures, video. So the Neptune in Pisces years have raised the question of, well, how do I discern? Yes, how do I discern what's in front of me? And so sometimes how it looks, meaning how it appears to you visually, it may not be what it is in reality. So of course it's sort of drawing upon the polarity point there, Pisces, their opposite Virgo, the need to have discriminating analysis. And so these are years that require a lot of you have to have your wits about you to make it through the Neptune in Pisces years with any sense of clarity, because of course one of the things that Neptune, and especially Neptune in Pisces, is notorious for is this question of fog. And so sorting through the fog, yes, what is really real, and sorting through the fog. And so having to contend with a lot of what would undermine our capacity for clarity. And so an amplification of confusion, and confusion that can really spread kind of like contagion. This is another Neptune in Pisces sort of thing. The question of contagion, what spreads sort of via osmosis. In a way, it just disperses throughout the collective. So states that, energetic, emotional states that make their way through the collective consciousness, and that's something that we have to contend with when we are talking about Neptune in Pisces. And then, of course, what we're looking at with Jupiter now entering the Pisces field. So we have both rulers of Pisces activating the sign. So that's quite significant. So Jupiter, of course, being the traditional ruler of Pisces, and then we have Neptune as the more modern ruler of the sign. And so the two of them working in concert, activating that Pisces sign field. Well, we basically have a big blowing up, a big amplification of these themes of confusion, of what would undermine our collective and individual capacity for clarity. And so sorting through confusion is a huge theme. What's really real? This is a big question. And so we're going to talk about a few tones of this conjunction, and sort of, well, how do we make sense of it? What kind of deeper realities does this conjunction point us toward? How can we cope with it, in the sense of what do we do with the energy? So we'll attempt to sort of get some perspective on that. And so we have to assess the last couple of years on the planet, the last 2 years on the planet, in the context of them happening in the Neptune in Pisces year. So Neptune in Pisces helps us to make sense of the let's say spiritual, energetic dimensions, the evolutionary conditions under which the last 2 years have occurred. And so the question would be, well, how clear have I been? Have I been able to be discerning through the fog? A big question is, well, how personally clear have I been in these last 2 years? What has been my own personal capacity for clarity? What has that looked like? Me, my family, my friends, the world? How clear are people looking? What is my own capacity for discernment throughout all of this chaos and all of this fog? This is a big question. But the thing is, the very interesting thing is that while there has been chaos and confusion, these very Neptunian things, and of course Jupiter there coming to amplify all of that, while there has been chaos and confusion on the planet, especially heightened in the last, let's say, 2 years, people have been opening up into, let's say, greater capacity for spiritual awareness. And it's very interesting with Neptune. Neptune, on the one hand, can be confusion, can be getting lost in a sea of falsity, things that appear to be real but are not quite real, the facade, the glamour, the sort of smoke and mirrors type of thing. And so while that is going on, that's one side of Neptune. The other side of Neptune is I'm seeing with a different portion of my anatomy. I'm using a higher consciousness with which to view my reality. And sometimes when there is a lot of falsity afoot, a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion, it would, let's say, spur on an awakening. It can spur on an awakening. There is only so much falsity that the human system is, let's say, able to take before it begins to recognize things that are, let's say, out of alignment or completely at variance with truth. And so there's that piece that one might say, depending on what school of thought you belong to, you might say the human being, let's say, comes with an inbuilt sort of barometer for truth. And so eventually, at whatever point of the timelines you're in, at some point the soul awakens to truth. It awakens to truth. Meaning the consequences of obfuscation of the truth become too much for the soul consciousness to bear. And so it must lay down what is false, it must lay down what is untrue. And so Neptune, on one level of its frequency, would get us into the realm, on one octave of its expression, one level of its expression. It would delineate and describe what's false, what's untrue, what would be in the realm of illusion. But then the soul consciousness awakens and it says, okay, I'm seeing through this illusion. I am seeing beyond the veil of illusion. And so I can't be fleeced or tricked or fooled, because a higher part of my anatomy has been awakened to be able to penetrate through the fog. And so Neptune is very interesting as an energy. It carries these two sort of poles. One would be confusion, chaos, illusion, and the other is, let's say, a clarity that is born out of the awakening of the soul consciousness and the awakening of a higher spiritual cognition. And that's so important to understand. The interesting thing is that confusion, ironically, can be something that prompts the soul consciousness into, I have to find the truth. And so it awakens the centers of higher spiritual seeing. It's very important to understand. And so many of you might have taken opportunities in the last 2 years. You found that your capacity for clarity to say, something doesn't feel quite right here in what's going on in the world. You might say, something is not sitting well with me. And that's also Neptune. Neptune would, let's say, activate your higher sensory perception. And so it would alert you to where there are untruths, or there are things that just do not fully carry truth within them. And so your higher centers would be alert to those things that are simply just not truthful. And so these are the tests of the times. Can I open up my spiritual centers of seeing? It's Neptune, the higher consciousness, the capacity to see beyond. Can I open up my higher spiritual centers of seeing? So Neptune, the planet there, tunes us into realms of perception. Yes, this is the thing with Neptune, that confusion would be where our perceptual faculties are not quite working as well as they should. But then, as we were saying, the higher potentials of Neptune is a complete clarity of perception, because what's called into function is a higher part of your spiritual anatomy. Your higher consciousness is called into function to be able to, as we said, penetrate through to the truth where that is obfuscated or obscured or covered over or hidden. And so in the Neptune in Pisces years, while there has been chaos and confusion, people have been opening up into, let's call it, an expanded spiritual control panel. And so on one level, Jupiter joining up with Neptune in Pisces is a gateway of energy that would, let's say, prompt further expansion into a larger spiritual control panel. Jupiter conjunct Neptune, an opening out, a building out expansion of our spiritual faculties. So beginning to kind of take a leap. It's an energy that would support a huge leap in terms of spiritual consciousness, a gateway of energy that would support, let's say, those who have perhaps already been investing in this expanded inner spiritual control panel from which to meet their lives. And so an expansion of our inner spiritual control panel, the spiritual faculties that are encoded within the constitution of human beings, well, it invokes then a Pisces archetype, the mystic. And so the Neptune in Pisces year is now being punctuated by this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. Well, it amplifies the potentials of the mystic coming online. And so the mystic, one who listens internally and within whom spiritual knowledge unfolds. So spiritual dimensions being activated within. That's the mystic. The mystic, inner understanding, through contemplation, through inner contemplation, revelations come. And so that is the potential of a highly Piscean time too, that through contemplation, through inner processes of revelation, inner listening, that spiritual understanding unfolds. And so the importance of going within. It's the Neptune Pisces archetype. Retreat into some sort of sanctuary. Go within, go inside to retrieve what is encoded into your soul consciousness. So you open up the inner ears and the inner eyes to be able to perceive and to directly, without an intermediary, to discern the truth from within. And so this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction can certainly be, let's say, a boost in confidence in terms of our capacity to, without some kind of intermediary, to go directly to the inner sources of truth and to have them be revealed, have them reveal to us, rather, the data and the knowledge that we're seeking. And so that is one of the higher potentials of a highly Piscean time. So Jupiter there conjunct Neptune, the confidence to become more of the mystic, to build out more of your own centers of higher spiritual consciousness and seeing, higher spiritual seeing. Yes, and because that is going to be so important in terms of, well, how do I navigate my world when, if I cannot rely on reflections, images to give me all the time an accurate representation of truth, then what ought I to rely on? And so the mystic, the one who seeks through inner listening and has an inner barometer of truth, is able to suss out from within the frequency of truth. That is the kind of spiritual control panel that is being built out. And so we could say that this is a gateway of energy that really supports, let's say, going back to some of the original instruction sets, original templates of consciousness that are given to the human being. The capacity to discern truth through inner listening, through an inner connection to the source of one's being, the frequency of truth can be felt. And so these capacities, these higher sensory capacities, a building out expansion Jupiter of these higher sensory capacities, Neptune, opening up into these dimensions that perhaps have been forgotten on the planet, but which are encoded into, let's say, the original instruction sets, the original templates of being human. And so how do we sort through a world where there is so much vying for your attention, our attention, by way of images? And so what do you use to make sense of things? What do you use to navigate through the confusion and the chaos and the illusion? It's an interesting thing. We live in a world where there is more and more and more data. There is no shortage of data. Yes, no shortage of data. But then data does not necessarily equate to truth. And so that would be important to understand, that how do you navigate through all of the data? There has to be something within that is able to suss out what is true. And so often You can find that, sort of taking in a lot of data is like chewing gum. So you chew, but you find yourself getting hungrier and hungrier. And so you're not truly satisfied. But when there is an inner flowering of consciousness, an inner flowering, an inner revelation of the truth, it's satisfying. It feels satisfying. You feel like you've had a good meal. You feel like you connect to meaningful answers about your existence. And so that would come through activation of higher sensory perception that goes above and beyond data, but which you need. You need that higher sensory perception to help you to navigate and sort through data, to pick up and discern what data is worth your attention, time, energy, and focus. And so one of the things that we mentioned on the channel in our discussion of Jupiter in Pisces some time ago now, we discussed the notion that Jupiter going into Pisces would support, let's say, expanding your belief systems and what you think is possible, especially through things that bend your ordinary notion of reality. In other words, things that defy the rules, the ordinary rules of reality. And so things become a bit more magical. So things that bend the rules, the ordinary rules of reality. And so your beliefs become expanded because you're exposed to things that expand your concept of what's possible. And so you get into the Neptune Pisces realm of magic, of things that just defy the ordinary rules. They bend the rules. They alter our usual concepts of what is possible. And so there is an expansion of your belief system and what you think is possible if you see that the ordinary rules of reality can become bent or function in a new way. And so that's something that is happening very quietly to many people as, they're seeing things. They are opening up into fields of perception, other arenas of reality that are out of the ordinary. And so, extraordinary experience. Neptune, Jupiter coming to expand those dimensions, but also to expand your beliefs about what's possible through exposure to these non-ordinary realities. And while expanding your notion of what's possible, Jupiter invites you into expanded fields, into opening up your territory, going beyond where you've been. But sometimes that is not easy. That's not easy because it involves you having to face up to your own fear. This is a bit too much beyond my notion of what's real. This is a bit too magical for me. I'm doubting myself. I am fearful of what reality is revealing to me about itself. So encountering your own fears and activating then these Jupiter-Neptune psychological attitudes of trust and faith and a willingness to venture into the magic, as Jupiter is a great explorer, Jupiter Sag archetype. So going out and venturing out into the magic, Neptune. But doing so involves having to face your own fears. People say, well, this is not real. That's not really real. That's not what's permitted in terms of, let's say, more consensus notions of reality. Jupiter Neptune, a gateway of energy that supports making a leap into new dimensions of reality that would appear to be magical, making a leap more broadly into new frontiers of experience, of spiritual experience that can be opened up to you now, expanding into new frontiers of what it means to be human, be a human who is endowed with certain capacities that have not been supported on the planet for hundreds of years, meaning that certain parts of the human anatomy have been suppressed or limited or curtailed. So it's a gateway of energy that supports, as we said, building out of more of this architecture of consciousness within human beings. activating more of the psychic, extrasensory, intuitional faculties that are held within the human anatomy of consciousness. And so, what more is available to me in terms of my experience of being human? What more? Jupiter invites you into expansion more. What more of my consciousness, of my non-physical apparatus, Neptune, can I call now into function? Can I expand into? And so while there is confusion and distortion and obfuscation and all kinds of agendas that are vying on the planet, many of which do not have human beings' best interest at heart, while there are all of these going on, let's say that your ace in the hole then is your capacity to, on your own terms, build out the natural capacities of consciousness that are available to you. You don't need anyone's permission to expand your own consciousness and to see more of the truth. So you don't have to wait to be given permission to use more of the natural faculties of human consciousness that are available to you, that can create marvelous synchronicities and goodness in your reality, finding security and peace within your own anatomy by being willing to expand into more of what that anatomy offers by way of your spiritual faculties, synchronicities, reality bending to your consciousness, having a more interactive relationship with your reality as consciousness in a body, as consciousness in a physical world. Riding the magic carpet then, where you begin to communicate and have a rapport, a dialogue, an interactive dialogue with the intelligent field of life as Pisces, the intelligent field within which we are all held. And you can develop your own rapport with that and bypass trouble to find safety, to find coherence, to find peace, to find bliss, to find what I call natural grace. This is Jupiter. Jupiter attunes us to higher states of grace. I feel the goodness, the benevolence of life. And so natural grace, Jupiter Neptune, opening into bliss, natural grace, finding peace, finding coherent states of harmony in the body, high frequency energy that engages you because you are engaging it. And so these are the things that are supported by a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, a gateway of energy, a peak point that says, come this way. If you are ready to experience other portions of reality that go beyond the conventional rules, if you're willing to open up your awareness to interact with the field of reality around you and to find natural grace. And natural grace is innocent. It's the thing that makes you look out your window and see the light changing and you say, it's a beautiful day today. It is a willingness to find grace in your reality that uplifts the spirit. That's what natural grace is. I am in a universe in which I can find peace, I can find safety. I am held within a loving intelligence that knows where I am and who I am. And so Jupiter Neptune, states of trust, states of faith, states of spiritual faith. And so faith would be a muscle. The more that you use it, the stronger that it becomes. And so interacting with your reality in an expanded way from an expanded place of faith and trust. Spiritual faith and trust, which opens up more dimensions of reality to you, which opens up more of your own consciousness to you, which allows you to play delightfully in your reality. Even as the world looks chaotic and there is more distortion than ever, you do not have to be subject to distortion and chaos and confusion. You can quietly, gracefully, playfully find your own rapport with this larger intelligent field and open up dimensions of magic that are not things that you read about in the news, But nonetheless, these are the potentials available to you. So be daring enough. Jupiter is quite intrepid. Jupiter, Sag matrix, a willingness to explore. So an intrepidness, a daringness, a willingness to explore these spiritual fields, what's available to me by way of my higher connections, my higher consciousness. What do I find as I explore more of these spiritual dimensions of my life? I can find my own personal reality of safety and goodness. I find more coherence. I listen to good music. I uplift myself, uplift my field, and I'm able to transmit that to other people and to make a difference where it matters. As we all cross this big threshold of consciousness on the planet here. And so, more spiritual confidence, building out of your own natural spiritual capacities that are encoded into your very being. So Jupiter Neptune conjunction, seed point, beginning, the beginning of a new cycle in terms of what spiritual wisdom is available to you, what capacities of consciousness are available to you as you explore the field. So perhaps on April 12, you might be moved to pause, and for a moment you might say, thank you for the blessings of goodness. This is Jupiter. Thank you for the blessings of goodness. Thank you that I am held within safety in a field of goodness, an intelligent field of benevolence as I explore the playground of consciousness. This is Jupiter, exploration of the vast playground of consciousness, Neptune. Thank you for the blessings of goodness and natural grace that props up my reality and in which I exist. And may my increasing trust in my own safety help me to navigate my physical realities with adeptness, with know-how, with savvy, with a bit more kindness and a bit more compassion as well. So, yes, perhaps you pause and take a moment to bless your reality. You don't have to wait for anyone to bless your life. You can do it yourself. Bless your existence and think of it as a dignified one. So a few musings and a few things to consider about this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction as Jupiter and Neptune work together in concert. So reminding you as usual, folks, that I'm available for a range of private astrological counseling and teaching consultations, and links to that are in the description box below the video, where you'll also find links to other astrological resources as well as a link to join my email list if you'd like these kinds of videos to be sent to your inbox. So wishing you a very blessed time of goodness and upliftment, and until next time, folks, talk soon. Bye.